Welcome back to our channel, where we share captivating and emotional stories. Today we'll tell you about Ethan, a single father who has faced unimaginable challenges while raising his twin daughters. My name is Ethan. My wife passed away during childbirth, leaving me with a void that nothing can fill. Since that day, I've been both a father and a mother to Olivia and Elisa, my twin daughters, who are so similar that I sometimes struggle to tell them apart. Olivia, the elder twin, is calm and thoughtful, while Elisa, the younger one, is bubbly and full of energy. Life hasn't been easy, but watching them grow has given me purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. I've done my best to provide them with a happy childhood, even though they didn't have the emotional presence of their mother. Through all those years, I had just one hope, that my daughters would grow up to be kind, happy people. Now, at 20 years old, Olivia and Elisa are beautiful, intelligent, and full of potential. But I never could have imagined that one day they would try to repay me in a way I could never have expected. It was a strange afternoon. Unlike usual, I left work earlier than normal that day. It was a rare chance to get home before dusk, and I felt a sense of relief as I walked back, eager for some quiet time to relax. But as I approached the house, I noticed something odd. The front door was slightly ajar. It was an unusual sight, and my heart tightened as a vague sense of unease crept over me. I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The sound of laughter from the living room stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't the familiar sound of my daughters watching a movie or chatting with friends. This voice was unfamiliar. A man's voice. As I stood there, Olivia's laughter mingled with his, and my heartbeat quickened with a mix of worry and confusion. Slowly, I moved toward the living room, each step feeling heavier than the last. The voices grew clearer, and my unease deepened. When I reached the doorway, the scene before me was like a slap in the face. Olivia and Elisa, the daughters I had cherished all these years, were there with a young man. All of them completely naked. They seemed lost in their own world, oblivious to everything around them. I froze, my emotions paralyzed by the shock of what I was witnessing. Then, a wave of anger erupted within me, breaking the silence. "What is this?" I shouted, my voice booming through the room. The three of them jolted out of their daze, panic flashing across their faces. The young man scrambled to gather his clothes, his hands shaking under the weight of my furious glare. Olivia stood frozen, her face pale, her lips quivering, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Elisa clutched a pillow tightly against herself, her entire body trembling. "Dad, Dad," Olivia finally managed to stammer, her voice weak. "Dad?" Catherine ran up to impart the news to her dad. Olivia stepped closer. "Whoa, what are you doing?" I roared, gripping the armrest of a nearby chair to steady myself as my anger surged. Olivia rushed toward me, her hands outstretched in a plea. "Dad, please, let me explain. Please calm down," she begged, tears streaming down her face. But I couldn't listen, not when everything I had believed in, every value I had tried to teach them, felt like it had crumbled in that instant. My eyes turned to the young man. "Get out of here! Now!" I bellowed, my voice sharp enough to cut through the suffocating tension. Terrified, he stumbled as he tried to dress, muttering frantic apologies while avoiding my gaze. As he moved toward the door, my anger reached a breaking point. I lunged forward, ready to grab him and teach him a lesson, but Olivia threw herself in front of me. "Dad, please don't, it's my fault, let him go," she cried, her voice choking on her tears. Elisa clung to my arm, adding her own plea. "Dad, we were wrong, but don't do this, please." I stopped, breathing heavily, my eyes still fixed on the young man. He glanced at me one last time, his legs trembling, before bolting out the door. The soft click of it closing left an unbearable silence hanging in the room. I turned to face my daughters, the anger inside me still simmering, but when I saw Olivia's tear-streaked face, my resolve faltered. How could I lash out at them now, when they were clinging to me, trembling and filled with fear? The daughters I had loved more than anything in the world were now fragile and vulnerable before me. Unable to process everything, I pulled away from them and stormed upstairs, slamming the door behind me. Leaning against it, I stood there, my body drained of energy, while my mind raced with emotions I couldn't contain. The house was quiet, but inside me a storm raged on. Ow. My breathing grew shallow and rapid, as if I were caught in a whirlwind of chaos that I couldn't escape. These were my daughters, the ones I had held close since the day they were born. I had promised myself I would protect them, raise them well, and give them a good life. But what I had just witnessed felt like a devastating blow, a painful reminder that they were no longer the innocent children I once knew, that I, their father, was no longer in control the way I thought I had always been. What had gone wrong? When had the gap between us grown so wide that I failed to see the changes happening before my eyes? The image of Olivia's tear-filled eyes and trembling voice pleading for my forgiveness played in my mind, and it hurt deeply. I never imagined I would have to face something like this. The anger burned inside me, not just toward them but toward myself, for not preventing this from happening. Questions swirled endlessly in my head. Why did they choose to do this in our home, right in the living room, a space that held so many cherished family memories? Why didn't they think about how I would feel, the father who had spent his life raising them and preserving the values I believed in? I wanted answers, but the more I thought about it, the more confused and trapped I felt. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I buried my face in my hands as tears threatened to spill. I held them back, questioning whether crying would change anything. As a father, I was supposed to be strong, but at that moment, I didn't feel strong enough to handle this. I didn't know how to approach them again. Should I scold them, punish them? I had every right to, but would it solve anything, or would it just push them further away? A thought struck me. I needed to talk to them. But not right now. I needed time, not just to calm my anger but to try to understand what had happened. Rising to my feet, I walked to the closet and grabbed a clean shirt. My body was drenched in sweat, yet my thoughts were cold and unyielding. I needed to leave the house, to find some air and distance from the suffocating memories in this room. Descending the stairs, each step felt heavy, my heart weighed down as if carrying an enormous burden. From downstairs, I could hear faint sobbing, Olivia and her sister. The sound stopped me in my tracks, and my anger began to ebb, replaced by an overwhelming sense of heaviness. Despite my frustration, I knew I was the only one who could guide them out of this confusion. But I needed time to clear my head and approach them without the rawness of my emotions. As I reached the living room, I was startled to see that they had changed into thin pajamas, their discomfort evident, but I wasn't in a state of mind to notice the details. My thoughts were chaotic, bouncing from one to another. Olivia spotted me and immediately ran over, grabbing my hand and gently pulling me toward her. "Dad, come here. We need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. I tried to shake off her hand, but the fear and tears in her eyes made it impossible. How could I resist my daughters when they looked at me like that? Reluctantly, I followed her to a nearby chair and sat down, saying nothing. I waited, my silence heavy, giving them the chance to speak. Olivia sat beside me, her gaze fixed on mine, afraid to let me go. Her sister sat across from us, her face filled with worry but unable to meet my eyes. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of my shallow breathing and their quiet sighs. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice quivering. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know what we did was wrong. I can't justify it, but I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think you'd come home so soon." Her sister added, her voice tight with emotion. "I'm sorry too. We didn't mean for this to happen. We didn't know what to do." Olivia grasped my hand, tears streaming down her cheeks as she continued. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I don't know what to say to make you forgive me." I looked at them, my heart heavy with sorrow. Their apologies were sincere, but they couldn't erase my anger or the pain I felt. Yet I couldn't deny the regret in their eyes. It was genuine, but regret alone couldn't fix what had happened. The room was filled with an unbearable silence, broken only by our quiet breaths. My body trembled with an indescribable mixture of emotions, a sense of choking helplessness. After what felt like an eternity, I let out a long sigh and said softly, "I know you're sorry, and I know you regret it, but what's done is done. No one can change that." Olivia clutched my hand tighter, her eyes pleading. "Dad, I don't know what to do. I regret it so much," she cried. A sister lowered her head, her voice cracking as she added, "We just wanted to try. But we didn't think it would go this far." The pain in my chest felt unbearable, like my heart was being torn apart. I knew that yelling or scolding them wouldn't solve anything. Sometimes time is the only answer, time for them to understand the gravity of their actions, and time for me to process their pain as well as my own. I gazed at my daughters, the ones I loved more than anything, and something shifted in my heart. My anger couldn't last forever. I was their father, and I couldn't let this destroy our bond. Pulling them into my arms, I hugged them tightly, letting the tension melt away even if just for a moment. I didn't say anything, just held them close, letting the silence bring us a sense of fragile peace. Finally I spoke, my voice soft but steady. I don't know how to fix this, or prevent it from happening again, but I'm not giving up on you. We'll get through this together. Olivia nodded slowly, and her sister quickly followed. A quiet sense of understanding filled the room. Though the pain and disappointment still lingered, holding them in my arms brought a faint sense of hope, a painful yet compassionate reminder of the love we shared. I couldn't stay mad at them forever. After all, they were still my daughters. When I finally released them from my embrace, Olivia and her sister remained seated, their eyes red and faces filled with worry. Neither dared to meet my gaze, as though awaiting a final verdict from me. Her sister bit her lip before finally looking up, her voice trembling as she said, "Dad, I know what I did was wrong. I promise it won't happen again. Can you trust me?" I gazed at both of them, my expression weary and full of sorrow. The world around us seemed to fade, leaving only the three of us in that moment. It hit me then that I couldn't stay stuck in the past or let anger rule my heart indefinitely. Mistakes happen, but what truly matters is how we address them and move forward. Pulling them close again, I hugged them tightly, this time with no anger, no resentment. "I won't abandon you," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix everything or make things the way they used to be, but I know one thing: if we stick together, we can get through this." Olivia and her sister nodded, their eyes glistening with a newfound hope. We sat there quietly for a long time, not saying a word, just being together. The silence felt different, peaceful, as if, despite the changes, there was still a chance for a fresh start. Eventually I stood and walked over to the window. The sun was setting, casting warm hues across the sky as the day transitioned into night. My heart wasn't entirely at ease, but for the first time I felt I could let go of my anger, at least for now. That felt like the most important step forward. I couldn't undo the past, but I could choose how to shape the future. "I love you," I said, turning to face them. This time the words weren't weighed down by pain. They were steady and strong, carrying the unconditional love of a father for his children. After a moment of quiet, the tension in the room began to lift. It wasn't a complete healing, but it was a start. Slowly, the sharp sting in my heart started to fade, replaced by a softer ache. When I looked at my daughters now, I no longer felt the piercing pain of anger. I felt love. We stayed together for a while longer, saying nothing but sharing a silent connection. It wasn't through words or promises, but through the simple acts of forgiveness, hugs, and understanding. It was an acknowledgement that we all needed each other, even in the face of mistakes. Finally, I got up and headed to my room. The weight in my chest had eased, though lingering questions still swirled in my mind. Despite everything, we had weathered a storm together, and I knew we would continue moving forward. My family, despite its flaws and challenges, would remain a family. The next morning, life seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm. The house was filled with warmth again, and the sound of my daughter's laughter echoed through the kitchen during breakfast. But deep down, I had learned something invaluable. I realized that within a family, nothing matters more than patience and understanding. Mistakes don't have to destroy relationships. They can test the strength of love and tolerance instead. Whether we're parents or children, none of us is immune to making mistakes. What matters is our willingness to learn and grow from them, becoming better for it. Forgiveness is never easy, but it's vital to the resilience of a family. Anger can cloud judgment and rob us of the opportunity to nurture and support one another. It's important to listen, to share, and to let love guide our actions, especially with those closest to us. Sometimes, all it takes to heal is a kind word or a warm embrace. Family love is the most precious thing we have, and it's a bond we should never give up on. It's a journey worth fighting for, no matter the challenges along the way.